Hello and welcome to this week's video blog from Nathan at Planworks. Firstly, just to say about the Married Persons Allowance, I don't know if you've noticed, but you can now reclaim the past 2 years if you've not claimed it. So that's an added bonus since the first video blog that I did. And this week we're going to talk about capacity for loss. So this is an area that we're seeing that people are still not looking at this in the right way. So capacity for loss is the client's ability to absorb falls in the portfolio. So completely different to attitude to risk. The attitude to risk is how the clients feel about taking risk, whereas capacity for loss is the ability to absorb those losses. So for example, if we've got a client that is in retirement, for example, and they've got a final salary pension income of say £30,000 a year, and the expenditure is say £25,000 a year for argument's sake, their capacity for loss for any investments outside of that would be unlimited because they've got the sufficient income or more than enough income to meet their needs. You might just want to earmark something for care fees, etc. On the flip side of that is a client that perhaps their attitude to risk comes out as a 6, 7 or 8, whereas the capacity for loss, i.e. if they were to experience falls in the market and those falls would impact their standard of life, then their capacity for loss is potentially 0. So I think the question is, do your clients need to take risk? And I think personally that is the job of advisors to help clients achieve their goals, taking the least amount of risk possible. And I suppose the second part to that is, can a client afford not to take risk? Now, where the capacity for loss doesn't apply is, or perhaps doesn't need to be taken into consideration so much, is if you've got a client who's 30 years old, who's putting money into a pension or have got existing assets within a pension, as they can't access it until age 55 or 57, as it will be fairly soon, their capacity for loss is almost irrelevant because they can't access that money for a good 20 odd years anyway, and therefore they've got the ability to absorb any falls within the portfolio. So just to summarise, capacity for loss is not a feeling, it's a fact. It's whether the client can afford to experience those losses within the portfolio. Would it have an impact on their standard of life? Personally, I don't think those questions can be answered by a risk profiling questionnaire, and I see lots of risk profiling questionnaires saying, how would you feel about a 20% loss in your portfolio? And I see graphs asking people which portfolio return would concern them. It's not about that. If they've got the income to cover their outgoings, then their capacity for loss would be high, moderate, whatever, depending on the individual circumstances. If a loss in their portfolio value would impact their lifestyle, their capacity for loss is potentially 0, and they perhaps shouldn't be investing. Yes, one would argue that inflation would cause losses, but I think you have to apply a degree of common sense. Anyway, that's it for this week. I hope you find that useful, and if you have any questions, just get in touch. Cheers, bye.